representing our respective states stand up and enforce the rule of law, the President of these United States is not above the law.
No matter how rich, powerful, or politically connected you are, everyone must play by the same rules.
Please sue him for us.
Oh, we're going to definitely sue him. We're going to be a real pain in the
And now the Trump Justice Department may be a pain in her you-know-what. The angle has obtained shocking allegations leveled by the Trump administration against New York Attorney General Letitia James. The Federal Housing Finance Agency has sent a criminal referral to the DOJ accusing James of mortgage fraud. In a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi, Director Bill Pulte says James appears to have falsified records in order to meet certain lending requirements and receive favorable loan terms.
All right, guys, I know this is going to come as an absolute shock to everybody, but Democrats are indeed guilty of the very things they accuse Donald Trump of doing. I know we're all so surprised to find that out, right? And specifically in the case of New York Attorney General Letitia James, the very same Letitia James that you may remember led much of the 2024 lawfare against now President Donald Trump, is indeed now under criminal investigation and has been referred criminally to the Department of Justice for potential and credible here, actually extremely credible, you'll see the evidence today, allegations of fraud. I know nobody could have seen that one coming, but nonetheless, I do think it is, first of all, worth noting that, yeah, videos like this certainly did not age well, did they?
Donald Trump and the other defendants have committed persistent and repeated fraud. Last week, we proved that in our motion for summary judgment. Today, we will prove our other claims. My message is simple. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much money you think you may have, no one is above the law. And it is my responsibility and my duty and my job to enforce it. The law is both powerful and fragile. And today in court, we will prove our case. I thank you all for being here. And again, justice will prevail. Thank you.
So nobody is above the law, and especially the law needs to be enforced when it comes to persistent and clear acts of fraud. Isn't that interesting? Well, ladies and gentlemen, in today's video, we got to tell you about the current criminal referral on New York Attorney General Letitia James for that exact thing, right? For fraud, as well as go over some of the new evidence that is emerging because the Daily Caller actually went to these supposed houses that she is claiming as her primary residences and found some very interesting things. So we'll get into it, folks, but first do us a favor. If you enjoy the content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. You subscribing is the best way to support our work and ensure that we can keep doing these videos. And I have a lot to say, but I guess let's just all start with this right here. What are the accusations and what exactly is Letitia James being accused of? Well, first and foremost, she apparently just received a criminal referral to the DOJ, the Department of Justice, for mortgage fraud. And essentially, we'll read to you and explain what the accusation is, and I'll show you why in this video. I mean, I really think it's going to come down to whether or not the DOJ just wants to pursue it. They think it's worth charging or not, because frankly, I think it's pretty undeniable given her actual post in the New York state government that this allegation of fraud is undeniable. Like, if you actually want to prosecute it, pretty easy to say she's guilty, because read what it is exactly right here. So to the DOJ, pursuant to my authority as director of the U.S. Federal Housing Finance Agency, I'm referring the matter below. As a regulator of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the Federal Home Loan Banks, we take very seriously allegations of mortgage fraud or other criminal activity, as you should, by the way, Mr. Watchdog here, because, again, let's remember, nobody's above the law. So true, guys. So true. Such misconduct jeopardizes the safety and soundness of FHFA, aka the law. Nobody is above the law. So true. But anyways, in the course of exercising the Federal Housing Authority, blah, 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 based on these reports, Miss Letitia James has, in multiple instances, falsified bank documents and property records to acquire government-backed assistance and more favorable loan terms. You mean to tell me she falsified financial records? Oh, isn't that so good? Isn't that hilarious? Because we might remember some of the things that went down in a certain New York courtroom in 2024, and the Democrats said, nobody's above the law, convicted felon. Oh. Well, again, isn't it so shocking to find out that those people are currently under investigation for falsifying business records? Now, you could say it's all petty or frivolous, or you could say it's not true. But first, hear out the allegations. This has potentially included, firstly, falsifying residence status for a Norfolk, Virginia-based home in order to secure a lower mortgage rate, and two, misrepresenting property descriptions to meet stringent requirements for government-backed loans and government assistance. So, to make a very long story short here, the central accusation is that she bought a home in Virginia and she claimed to the government, in order to get a government-backed, lower mortgage rate here, she claimed that that was her primary residence, right? That's where she lives, is in Virginia at this house. Obviously, the big issue with that is that while she bought this, she only bought this like 1 or 2 years ago, right? While she bought this, she was, of course, serving as what? The Attorney General of the state of New York. And again, she told, legal systems here that this was her primary residence in Virginia. So that's why I say, again, if they want to pursue this fully, it should be pretty straightforward. If that's really what she said, and she did so willingly, and she knew what she was doing to get this loan, pretty obvious. She was committing fraud. It's actually extremely straightforward, right? It'd be one thing if this was a case where, and by the way, a lot of people do stuff like this where, hey, you live in one place 6 months out of the year and another place 6 months out of the year, and you file your taxes out of the address that is the lower tax state. Not saying I would ever do that, okay? Because remember, nobody's above the law, but we do know people who do this, okay? So this is common, and, sometimes you might say it's not that big a deal, but in this case, she is, of course, everyone knows, right? The New York Attorney General, she's spending almost the entirety of the year in New York. Obviously, Virginia is not her primary residence, and if it somehow is, on the flip side, if she is going to claim she lives in Virginia, that would, of course, be election fraud because she's living in Virginia, so she's ineligible to serve as the New York Attorney General. That's why I say this is so egregious. This is so straightforward. And frankly, it really does summarize her attitude that she thought she could get away with this, really. That's, it's one thing to cover your tracks. It's one thing to be smart. You manipulate the tax code a little bit to get a little more deductions. That's so straightforward. You're the AG of New York. Everyone knows you live there, but you claim you live in Virginia. Come on, seriously? Anyways, here's the background and the some more information here. At 604 Sterling Street in Norfolk, Virginia, on August 17th, 2023, Miss Letitia James granted this person the power of attorney to make a Virginia property, quote, her principal residence. And on August 30th and 31st, through her attorney, Miss James purchased this property in Norfolk, Virginia. In a Fannie, and here's where it gets interesting. In a Fannie Mac / Freddie Mac Form 3047 and in mortgage documents, she reaffirmed this would be her primary residence, despite obviously, as everyone knows, being a statewide public office holder in the state of New York at that same time, and obviously primarily residing in the state of New York. So on two different cases, she, it was one thing she checked a box and you claim, oh, I didn't really know what I was doing. No, she granted power of attorney to make it the principal residence, and on mortgage forms also said it's the principal residence. Obviously, why? To get a lower mortgage rate. But that is what? Fraudulent. That's against the law. Remember, nobody's above it. In fact, a building permit issued on her New York property on July 15th, 2024 lists her New York property as, quote, the James residence and states remain occupied. Yeah, you can't have two primary residences, right? Everyone knows that. Primary residence mortgages face, or receive, I should say, more favorable loan terms, including lower interest rates than secondary residence mortgages, obviously. Lenders view secondary residence mortgages as significantly riskier, as a borrower is more likely to continue paying it off, blah, 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 blah. So interest rates, obviously, as everyone knows, right, are lower, so that's why she tried to do it. Again, one could say they understand why she did it, but again, here's the thing. At the time of the 2023 Norfolk, Virginia purchase, Miss James was the sitting Attorney General of New York and is required by law to have her primary residence in the state of New York. Yeah, again, I think we get the idea. It is like extremely straightforward here. But secondly, apparently there is, this property right here. January 26, 2001 certificate lists this property in Lafayette, Brooklyn Avenue, New York as having 5 units. On February 14th, 2001, Miss Letitia James purchased this 5-family dwelling, and Miss James secured a conforming loan through the Fannie Freddie Mac Form 3033. So she tried to do this twice. And conforming loans are only available, look at this, on 4-unit or less structures. So in 2 different cases, like even, I guess, decades ago, she also committed mortgage fraud with the Fannie Mac, Freddie Mac kind of loan. Okay, so that's pretty interesting to say the least. Spanning the last 2 decades, Miss James has consistently misrepresented the same property as only having 4 units in both building permit applications and numerous mortgage documents and applications. This even includes a 2011 application for the Home Affordable Modification Program. That is so egregious. And again, maybe a lot of people do stuff like this. I don't know. But let's remember, nobody is above the law. Now, that said, I want to further talk about what the Daily Caller, our friends over at the Daily Caller, found out today, because they actually knocked on the doors of the Virginia residences here. As you can see, the Daily Caller News Foundation visited 2 Southern Virginia properties at the center of fraud and misconduct claims against Democrat New York Attorney General Letitia James, and found that James does not appear to be a resident of either home. Gee, you don't say. You don't say, Captain Obvious. Not to be insulting, but obviously everyone knows that's true. Of course she's not. She's the Attorney General of New York. FHFA referred James to the DOJ for potential investigation, as you can see, referring to a white-collar fraud report presenting evidence that James may have committed mortgage fraud with one property while filing inconsistent disclosure reports about loans on another. Just hilarious. So anyways, long story short, one of the properties is a modest 2-story home located in a quiet residential Norfolk neighborhood. James is alleged to have characterized the property as her principal residence, possibly to secure better mortgage terms. But check this out. While Daily Caller arrived at the house on Wednesday afternoon, all of the blinds were drawn, and a female yelled out from within the home before the Daily Caller identified itself or asked any questions that she did not have any comment to share. That's very interesting. But check this out. The voice from inside the home did not sound at all like James's voice as heard in press conferences. Let's go on here. But actually, first, let's play that video so you can see it.
There's a car parked in the driveway.
Hello there, ma'am.
No comment, you're trespassing.
No comment?
Yeah, you're trespassing.
Okay, well, who lives here?
You're trespassing.
Who lives here, ma'am?
No comment. Okay.
Well, I think a couple things are transparently obvious there. First of all, whoever is living there is not Letitia James. That sounds nothing like her. They clearly also know what is going on, right? Why are they saying no comment to the reporter? I mean, we know she's probably familiar with the situation on some level. And lastly is that Letitia James is obviously not living there, okay? That could be a family, that could be friend, That could be a random tenant that she's probably like renting the place out, right? For all we know. But whatever it is, whether she's using it as an investment rental or whatever, I don't know. Maybe someone will find that home on Airbnb for all we know, right? It's clearly not her primary residence. And that's exactly what the Daily Caller went and found out. But here's where it gets even more interesting, right? The Daily Caller interviewed neighbors who reside in the vicinity of the home to learn more about who may or may not be living in the house. Notably, there was only one vehicle in the driveway upon Daily Caller's first pass by the home, but a second vehicle had parked in the driveway some point in 30 or so minutes that elapsed before the Daily Caller News Foundation passed by the home again. One neighbor told the Daily Caller that he believes a black woman and children inhabit the home, which had a basketball hoop in the driveway, but did not recognize Letitia James when shown a photo. Of course not. She doesn't live there. We can sit around and speculate, but I think it's so obvious. Either she doesn't live there, or for some odd reason she does, and she's committing, again, election fraud here. Nonetheless, a second neighbor commented that only to say it's not the lady from New York, presumably James, who is living in the residence. Again, gee, you don't say. Everyone knows. Notably, James submitted the August 2023 paperwork for this particular home just weeks before she began her trial against Donald Trump. Okay, the timing there, are you serious, right? Because you would think if you're going to bring the lawfare, if you're going to bring a politically motivated, legal case, criminal case like you did, wouldn't you, I don't know, maybe try to stay within the rules, at least when you're trying to prosecute Donald Trump? Like, you don't want to look that stupid? I guess not. I guess that is how insanely arrogant and like they think they're above the law, right? These Democrats are. I assume they thought Biden was going to win re-election and they were just going to, soar high and no one would ever look. And guess what? They kind of screwed that one up, right? Anyways, when the Daily Caller arrived at the second home, a 2-story house in a different Norfolk neighborhood, 2 of its residents were on the porch outside the front door. One of the residents ordered the Daily Caller to leave without answering questions as to whether she knew James or had any relationship with her. The resident said that whether or not she is on the property connected to James, quote, doesn't matter. Well, it might not matter to her. It might not matter for the family or whatever, but certainly for Letitia James, I would argue it matters. By the way, I would just like to point out that from Albany, New York, the New York state capital, she's a statewide politician, so I presume that's where she works, to Norfolk, Virginia, where these houses are, according to Google Maps, is a 500-mile, 8 hours and 21-minute drive. And I'm recording this kind of late at night. So during the daytime with traffic, it's like 9 or 10 hours from New York to Southern Virginia, Northern New York to Southern Virginia. Yeah, she doesn't live there, okay? Like, hey, forget about it. Like, everyone knows. But anyways, we go on. I feel like I don't have to keep reading this. Like, it is so abundantly obvious that she did it. So I think there are 2 questions. First and foremost, if these allegations, if what's being talked about in any of this are true, is she guilty of fraud? Yes, absolutely. That's like indisputable in my opinion. If she really put that down as a primary residence, forget it. That's not her primary residence. Everyone knows that, number 1. Now, number 2, I know what people are going to say. They're going to say, oh, come on, Vince, but that's kind of petty, is it not? It's like, hey, again, a lot of people do that. A lot of people, kind of exaggerate what the primary residence is for tax purposes. I'm sure some people maybe abuse the 3033 loan for the same exact purpose. But here's the thing, okay? First of all, again, you kind of make it obvious what you're doing when you're the New York Attorney General claiming you live in Virginia, number 1. But also number 2 here, like we keep saying, right? Nobody is above the law. And of course, the great irony of this is what? What exactly was the crime that they manufactured against Trump and tried to claim he was like the worst guy ever? What'd they say? It was falsifying business records. And when it really broke down to it, it was the alleged misfiling and misrepresentation of a little bit of paperwork. Like, it was not a serious deal. They turned that into how many? 34 felony counts, like they keep going on and saying. So, yeah, newsflash, guess what? When you open Pandora's box, when you declare that that's something to be charging, first of all, and secondly, especially against your political opponents. Hey, as we warned you, we try to tell you, don't be surprised when the same exact thing happens to you. You think I'm supposed to feel sorry for Letitia James? I don't.
Judge Wilson, what's the statute of limitations on a misdemeanor in New York?
1 year.
The business records case is a misdemeanor, correct?
The underlying crime, the falsifying business records, yes, that's a misdemeanor charge.
So the only way to get to a felony is by committing it, or is by in concealment of another crime?
Correct.
And each one of those crimes has specific elements.
That's right.
And you have to prove, in order to get a conviction at trial, you have to prove every element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt, right? That's just traditionally how this works.
That is the right way to do it.
So in the indictment, did they put the underlying crime?
No, they did not. They only described it as other crimes.
Okay. And in the jury instructions, did they put the specific underlying crime?
No, the falsifying business records was described in the jury instructions. There was some brief description of the New York State election law violation, but there was no description given of the choice of three crimes. There was a description given of falsifying business records, which was pretty ironic because it was falsifying business records to falsify business records.
So, and that's also a misdemeanor, right?
That should be, yeah.
So you have 2 + 2 = 6. Like if you commit 2 misdemeanors, you get to the felony statute of limitations, which they had to get or they could have never brought the case.
That's correct. But there's some more question marks regarding the statute of limitations. It's not cut and dry because the time that Donald Trump spent out of New York could be used to toll the statute of limitations. That was the ruling in the Court of Appeals Harvey Weinstein case. He argued that the time that he spent out of California should not have told it, out of New York, that is, in California, should not have told the time limitations, but the Court of Appeals ruled against him on that issue.
Yeah, so again, we're going to keep saying it. Nobody is above the law, except the difference between the bogus case against Trump and the current allegations against Letitia James is, in the case of Trump, what did they have to do? A bunch of mental gymnastics, right? They had to rig the court, rig the jury. They had to claim, basically, they had to do all this like gymnastics with the, statute of limitations and upgrading a misdemeanor to a felony and all that. Like they had to just jump through so many hoops and hurdles to try to convince people, although nobody even in the end really bought it, that, oh my gosh, Donald Trump is such a bad, evil criminal. Except on the contrary, in the case of Letitia James's alleged mortgage fraud here, it's like extremely cut and dry. If any of that's true, okay, yeah, she did it. Again, she doesn't live in New York. I mean, Virginia, I should say. It really is all that straightforward. And, the great irony here, once again, is that the very crime that Letitia James apparently prosecuted, at least in civil court, by against Trump, which was defrauding the lenders there. And again, that's what it is, right? Fraud, blah, 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 blah. Turns out she was the one defrauding her lenders during that very prosecution while she was doing it. Hilarious, right?
Well, obviously, the irony is perfectly crushing. This is a person who prosecuted Trump for everything short of ripping a label off a mattress. And among the charges that were brought in New York, in not just the civil but the criminal case, was making false or misleading statements to financial institutions. And one of these sections, Section 1014 of the federal code, is prosecuted. It took me about 60 seconds of a search to find cases that the Department of Justice brought against people who falsely claimed that property was their principal residence in order to get loans. So this is well-tread areas for the Justice Department. As for James, if we apply the Letitia James standard that she created, there'd be little question here. This seems pretty straightforward. What the administration is saying is this was not her principal residence. In fact, as a New York elected official, she had to say that her principal residence was in New York. This was an out-of-state residence. But also, they claim that in some of these forms, she actually states that her father is her husband in order to file as a married couple. So there's a lot of those questions. And as you know, the Supreme Court just stated earlier in March in a case called Thompson that they want to see knowing false statements under sections like 1014, not just misleading statements. These are misleading statements. Either it's your principal residence or it's not.
Or it's not.
Either you're married to your father or he's your father. So they can this can satisfy the Thompson standard.
That's just like, wow. That's just unbelievable. I think it's such a prime case of hubris and pride and ego, and how unchecked it can just completely bring you down, like dominoes, crazy. Because, again, she's literally in the active process of prosecuting Trump for fraud while committing fraud, allegedly here. But again, if that's true, it's blatant fraud. It's not really up for dispute. But, okay, we have to prove it in court. Fine. Once you prove it, though, there's no argument to be made. That's just true, right? In that case, it's obviously fraud, as the guy brings up there. Yeah, it's not exactly a misleading statement. It's just a false statement. And apparently she was also claiming that she was married to her dad. I don't know what it is with these Democrat politicians and making false claims of a certain I word in order to, make certain moves in the world. But okay, nonetheless. And as all this is happening, guys, as she is being referred now to the Trump DOJ for, if it's true, very obvious fraud, here she goes in response, melting down on stage, okay? I'm being told maybe some of her comments include that she will never surrender. But anyways, let's check it out.
My mission is clear. I'm focused. I'm prepared. I'm ready. I've been trained by the best. I went to Howard University that overturned legal segregation in this country. I've been taught in those classrooms where Thurgood Marshall once taught. I'm not afraid of no president. Donald Trump, we're ready for you. We're coming for you. We're standing up for you. We're fighting on. We're not going down silent. Victory, my friends, is clear. It's now. And I'm not waiting 4 years. I'm waiting 2. Until a speaker by the name of Hakeem Jeffries comes to bring us some rest. Come on, ladies, it's up to us. We saved this democracy before. We'll save it now. Let's go.
Yeah. Okay, good luck with that, right? I don't know. But she's going to be defiant till the end. We'll see how long that lasts, though, because if this case escalates and all this stuff is true, again, I don't know what argument she has out of it, Seems pretty straightforward to me. But again, nobody's above the law, which I want to remind, why didn't she say that? Why did she not say that in this little speech here? I don't know. Comment your thoughts on that down below. But all right, with that said, guys, let me know your thoughts broadly on everything we talked about today. Because, again, I think it is, frankly, not only clear and obvious, if it's all true, but also just insanely hilarious. Like, you couldn't even script that in a comedy movie. Oh, she was committing fraud very blatantly while prosecuting Trump for fraud. Anyways, though, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, guys. Subscribe if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.